Your support is greatly appreciated. Please engage that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more content. This is Aberration Earth. Chapter 8. Stone in the Sky. They traveled directly east after leaving the harbor. Merrick didn't understand why they weren't heading south back towards the Blanche Land, where the enemy had most likely taken Grace. But he didn't ask his present company any questions about it either, deciding it was better now to remain quiet while in the company of these monsters, at least until he could better understand their mood and motivations. Communication was critical, and for reasons not within his understanding. His translation suite was not deciphering any language from the beast, nor did the machine answer him, at least not in any way he could comprehend. He looked for the flashing lights, but the construct had gone silent, offering nothing. The dragon's back was more comfortable than he would have ever imagined, and with the proliferation of spines running from crown to tail tip, he had plenty of handholds available to him to keep himself secure during the voyage, though he had no idea how long it might be. As the higher altitude winds whipped past them, he thought of the friend he'd left behind. It had been a hasty departure, and he regretted not having much time to discuss the matter in more depth with Captain Jenker. But the fire-breathing lizard had been persistent in insisting he climb upon him, waving his arm with increasing intensity as he pointed between Ventrulus and his own backside. It was an easily understood gesture, and no verbal exchange was necessary to convey the meaning. But before he left, the spaceman turned and called out to Demad. "I'm going with them to save Grace. Thank you for everything." "What do you mean you're going with them? They're monsters!" the captain exclaimed, extremely alarmed by his friend's declaration. "That's true," the spaceman responded. She's a fairy," Jenker decried. "And I'm a giant," he replied again. "Fine, if you get eaten by them, that's on you," Demad concluded, making his position on the matter clear. "It is," he conceded. "Ah, have it your way. Thanks for saving my skin, big man. Be careful, and I'll pray to Old Father that you make it through this safe. I hope we see each other again." The Havenite suddenly relented, realizing he had no good arguments that would sway him to stay. "We will. I owe it to you. I wouldn't have made it this far without your help," Merrick admitted, grateful for the friendship he had made. "Can it? No regrets," the captain snapped, speaking as if issuing commands. "What about your admirals?" Ventrulus asked, becoming concerned about what might unfold after his departure. "Leave them to me. They're my problem now," Jenker assured him. "Check your cabin. I left something there for you. I hope it can smooth things over," the spaceman then said, offering a smile and a nod as he turned to leave. It was the design schematics for his personal sidearm, the Pelter, a far superior weapon to anything they had ever had in their arsenal, and one he thought they could use. The Havenites would be well advantaged with such a superior piece of technology. In this world of inhuman monsters and unimaginable dangers, the continuing survival of the human race was at the heart of their story, and if he could avail them with something that could continue that forward, he was more than happy to do so. That was how they left each other, with one man climbing upon a dragon's back and ascending with the flap of great wings into the skies, while the other marched across the deck of his own ship shouting out a litany of orders. In hindsight, he wasn't sure if it had been the right decision, though there was no going back on it now. He was stuck on the beast's backside until they eventually arrived at wherever it was these two monsters were heading. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him either. He was hell-bent on helping the kind fairy who had assisted him in his escape from the very same beasts that he was in the company of now. With the hope of facilitating a rescue, he had gone with them. But now he wondered what the fate of Havenlock Harbor and the rest of the friends he had made among the crew of the Urchin Gull would be. It was a worry he would have to bear for some time. The dragon hadn't given him a second glance since they had left the floating city. Either he was confident in his passenger's ability to remain atop him, or he didn't care enough to check. Looking back as they went, he was confident the two monsters had done an exceedingly fine job of breaking the enemy siege, leaving the defenders in a good position to drive the remaining hostile forces away. He realized this had been one of his most impulsive decisions since making Planetfall, but he felt compelled to help the leprechaun's daughter. She had extended a hand of friendship to him in a most literal way, at a time when it was most needed. There was no way, in his mind, that he could justify turning away from her after what she had done for him. With so few friends in this world, Merrick couldn't afford to lose any of them, especially not the very first one. That was an unacceptable scenario for him. For all his military training and the harshly disciplined exterior that curated, exasperated by the aloofness born of the augmentations permeating his cranium and central nervous systems, Merrick Ventrulis had a capacity for caring that was much bigger than what his very large self presented. As they continued eastward, he took a deep breath to settle his nerves and scanned the ocean and islands below, passively logging the geography into electronic storage, mapping the world as it went by. The day was coming towards night again, and the water caps caught the falling light, reflecting pretty oranges and reds. Even a touch of pink winked up at them on occasion. Before darkness fully came, he saw that they were headed for a large cloud front, which didn't make him overly concerned, as it had none of the characteristics of a storm, but left him wondering still, as it seemed unusual in its placement. Not that he could pinpoint what exactly it was about it that didn't sit right with him. By all reasonable observations, it looked like any innocuous nimbus one might expect, though he didn't see much movement from it, and the winds appeared to be quite strong where they were. When they flew directly into it, the last thing he had anticipated was the cloud simply vanishing, and in its place, ahead of them, suspended there floating high above the earth in now open skies, a massive, many-kilometer-tall mountainous rock that tapered at both top and bottom from the wider center. It was a floating mountain. The spaceman was stunned. He hadn't seen anything like this in his descent from the Cazoose, and even though it hadn't looked like the Earth they had expected, the planet had still appeared unremarkable from their orbital vantage. There had been nothing like this. He could see it was peppered with cave mouths across the surface, some of which he swore had the occasional flicker of light coming from deep inside, as if there was some activity happening within. Speeding towards it, without slowing, made the Zaxvoyant tighten his grip upon the spines he held onto. Without even thinking, he flattened himself against the back of the beast. A timely decision, as his ride suddenly turned to face sharply upwards when they closed in. Ascending vertically at a fast pace, his breath caught in his throat, as the rocky exterior of the floating stone raced past only inches away. He would later swear that the low grumbling noises he heard at that time coming from the beast were the sounds of its laughter. The mechanical construct followed behind them at a distance. It had changed itself somehow into a more aerial configuration for the journey, no longer resembling the gigantic robotic thing that had landed on the deck of the Urchin Gull. Its appearance was now like that of a plane or spacecraft, yet still different from anything he had ever seen, with wings sprouting from a central fuselage, ports for thrusters to the rear, he surmised, and others beneath for precise directional control. While it had the look of something man-made to a degree, there was an unconventional quality to it, and it performed unlike anything made by human hands. He had seen the speed it could achieve, the hard angular turns it could make, the intensity of the energy it produced. Its performance easily outmatched the very best technology Leopold 7 had to offer. He wondered how Grace had fared as a passenger of the machine. It must have had to limit itself to protect her from any injuries it could potentially cause. When he had seen her for that brief time before she was taken, she had seemed completely unharmed. Gray, brown, and black rock zipped past them as they climbed higher and higher along the vertical length of the mountainous stone anomaly. Until at last, after passing the midpoint and reaching halfway up to the top, a massive cave entrance came into sight before them, and the red dragon, upon spotting this, suddenly veered hard horizontally, using his wings to rapidly change their direction, and nearly sending Ventrulus flying off his back. Shaken, he managed to keep his hold on the beast, and seconds after, the three were heading deeper within. The cave was just the beginning of what appeared to be a massive tunnel that had been bored into the stone. The walls and ceiling were dark, smooth and rounded, while the floor below was flat and made in some parts with stone and in other sections with a type of steel plating he had never seen before. The passageway led straight in, but took a sharp right turn after a short length, and continued along a gradual curve that appeared to spiral through the insides of this place, intersecting with many other tunnels along the way. Finally, after over a half hour of traveling through the labyrinthine interior, they arrived at a larger cavity. This space was like an earthen cathedral, a massive open area with at least a half dozen other connecting corridors coming into it. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, and some reached even far enough to form up-down at ground level, meaning that, geologically speaking, as the spacemen understood it, this place was more than old. It was ancient. There were different levels here, shelves of stone jutting out from rock walls that had been exposed by the evident hollowing out of this space. It looked as if the rock had been melted in places and metals brought in to reinforce certain areas. The Zaxfoyan spotted what was clearly a mechanical panel with lights strobing across the face of it, and as he looked around more carefully, subtly woven throughout were thick transparent filament cables, making them nearly impossible to see apart from the occasional flash of a blue, yellow, or white electrical pulse racing along the length of them. The fire-breathing Drake circled through the chamber, climbing high enough for him to touch the ceiling, if he had been so inclined, before coming down to land in a spot hidden from them when they had first arrived, sandwiched in between a forest of stalagmites and a pair of high, roughly chiseled ridges. When they landed, it was with surprising grace, the huge monster's clawed feet touching down gently upon the surface, its wings pumping hard against the air to offset its own weight. Looking up from floor level, he could judge with some accuracy that the roof was a good quarter of a kilometer above them, and the cavity itself had to be about half a kilometer in diameter. While he had no idea where they had taken him and what they might do, Merrick found comfort in Grace's last words before she had been abducted, that he could trust these two. The dragon had turned its head and was staring at him, its eyes narrowing as if it wanted something of him, and then with a slight nod of its snout, he understood. It wanted him to get off, and in the next instant, with a leap, his feet were on solid ground once again. With a snort, the oversized fire-breathing lizard launched itself up with a flap of its wings to land on a nearby overhang. Its muscular bulk perched at the edge threatened to break the rock itself. Pebbles and dust trickled down into his faceplate, forcing him to wipe it clean with a hand. The monster released a roar that shook the cavern, and he could feel the vibrations through the floor. A cloud of dust fell from the roof. It was a frightening display of raw power, and he wondered how large its lungs must be to cause such an effect. A low rumble followed this outburst, and as it stared down at him with its discerning reptilian-like eyes, he would swear the beast held itself with great pride in its bearing and how it carried itself, maintaining a particular posture that spoke to this. "What now?" Ventrulus asked, yelling up at the crimson-scaled drake, his voice echoing for a moment throughout the cavernous chamber and down into the connecting passageways. The red dragon gave him a snort, and as smoke curled out and up from its large nostrils, it looked away from him and towards the mouth of a tunnel. where slowly cruising out he spotted the mechanical construct. External lights were on full display. Its body sparkled with 1,000 twinkling luminous points, pulsing so rapidly it became hard for him to look at. But look he did, for the machine had changed once again, and now approached them in the full shape of something approximating the form of a man with wings affixed to its back. Though unlike a man, it had to be at least 80 feet tall, and reminded him of something he had read in the literary archives on Leopold VII many years past. A religious text, describing divine beings that were something like men with feathered wings. Angels they had been called, who served as messengers for an almighty God. And while certainly this thing was different, he couldn't help but draw the comparison, and in his mind, it seemed like he was standing in the presence of one of those beings, but this one made of iron and steel. As the monster above looked on, the machine headed towards them, and in a moment, it had landed a mere 24 yards away from the spaceman, leaving him sandwiched, somewhat nervously, between the two behemoths. Like a David in ancient scriptures, he too was confronted by a Goliath, but this Goliath was different in that he also had a friend. And there ends this episode. Until next time, thanks for listening. Please engage the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content.